We turn now to Sean O'Brien. He is the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, one of the nation's largest labor unions, and he joins us this morning from Boston. President O'Brien, thank you so much for being with us on this Labor Day weekend. I want to start out by asking you about endorsements. You lead one of the 10 largest unions in the country, and I want to put this graphic up. Take a look. The other 9 have all issued their endorsements for President of the United States. They've all endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz. It is now September 1st. Where has summer gone? When do the Teamsters plan to announce who they are endorsing?
Well, I think historically the Teamsters have always endorsed after both respective conventions. This is a little different this time under our leadership. We've brought every single candidate to the table in front of our rank and file members and our general executive board, and we're waiting on Vice President Harris to commit to come meet with us.
And I believe her campaign says they are working with you to figure out a date for that. You know, her policies are more or less in line with the current president, who you did sit down with when you thought that he was going to be the nominee, when we all thought he was going to be the nominee. Are there any concerns that you have about Harris possibly being less pro-labor, less pro-union than the current president?
So our union is a lot different than most unions. We represent 1.3 million members. Half of our members are Republicans, half of our members are Democrats, so we have to serve all of our membership equally. Look, everybody has a different style of leadership. We want the opportunity to sit down with Vice President Harris. I mean, I said to someone the other day, you don't hire someone unless you give them an interview. And, you know, this is our opportunity to ask her about Teamster-specific issues and also labor issues. So until we have that meeting, you know, obviously we will wait to make that determination.
Very quickly, you didn't endorse anyone back in 1996. Is there a possibility that could happen again?
Look, we want to make sure we make the best decision and endorse the best candidate for labor. You know, 1996 was a long time ago. It's all going to be driven by our rank and file members and our leadership. We're a very, very democratic union.
Got it. Sean O'Brien, stay with us. We're going to have more questions for you after the break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with Teamsters President Sean O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien, thanks so much for sticking with us. One of your fellow unions, the United Auto Workers, filed federal labor charges against the Republican nominee Donald Trump after he seemed to celebrate the notion of firing workers who go on strike. That happened in a conversation that he was having with Elon Musk. Are you with the UAW on this? Do you support the action they took?
Look, I support anybody that attacks labor. They should be held accountable, and any organization that's going to hold them accountable. I can't speak for the UAW, but if you recall when those remarks were made by former President Trump, I was the first union to call them out, call the administration out, and call, quite frankly, Elon Musk out. I've been fighting corporate billionaires and greed for the last 2.5 years, and you know, UAW feels they have a right to file an NLRB charge, and that's their right. I've got a right to call out former President Trump or anybody else that attacks labor.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, you called it economic terrorism. How did it go over with your members?
Look, our members love the fact that they have a voice, that they have the ability to stand up and fight corporate America. It's been a long time coming. Over the last 2.5 years, the Teamsters Union has had 226 strikes. We've grown more than we ever have. So there is a great appetite for the fight with our rank and file members. And our rank and file members enable us to fight for them day in and day out.
That's a perfect segue into my next question, which is about union membership in this country. It is Labor Day weekend, after all. So let's take a look at the state of union labor in this country. About 10% of the U.S. workforce are union members, down from about 20% in 1983. A majority of Americans say that's bad. That decline is bad for working people. Is the decline irreversible in your view?
The decline is definitely irreversible. Now, let's look back, you know, to 1980-83. That's when a bipartisan congressional bill was passed, trucking deregulation, and we lost 400,000 members. A lot of companies went bankrupt. So, you know, although there's a lot of politicians taking credit for the labor movement over the last couple of years, they're the same politicians that caused this problem that we face today. But to answer your question, I think we are definitely on the upswing. We have proved how valuable the American worker is to this country, especially through one of the biggest crises we faced was the pandemic. And that has obviously incentivized workers to form unions. And we've got to work collaboratively with both sides to make sure that people will be able to organize without retribution or retaliation moving forward. And that's up to politicians, whether you're an R, a D, or an I.
You know, you shared that message at the Republican convention, a move that some members of Teamsters leadership did not approve of. They were pretty vocal about that. It appears that it also cost you a speaking slot at the Democratic convention. Did the Democrats ever tell you why they didn't give you a chance to speak?
No, they didn't. And look, I'm going to say this. Whatever the critics out there, and they're very few in the leadership, whenever I get an opportunity to highlight the American worker, especially the Teamster worker, I'm going to take any and all venue. We asked both conventions respectively at the same time, and the Republican National Convention immediately responded to us, didn't try and edit any of our messages, and I was hopeful that the Democrats would do the same, but they didn't. I'm not upset about it, but I can tell you this, my rank and file members who have been lifelong Democrats are not happy about it.
Yeah, I know there were some members of the union who spoke, but that's not the same as having the leader of the organization speak. Very quickly, did you choose to speak at the Republican convention, which is a pretty unusual move for a union leader, because you feel that Trump has been more pro-labor than past Republican nominees?
No, not at all. I spoke there because it was the ability to highlight how important we are. It was the ability to call out the people, the corporate elitists, who forget who built this country, the American workers. You know, people like to, you know, have their own opinions on why we were there, but I was there to talk about the American workers. It wasn't an endorsement for any and all Republicans. It was strictly a message about how important and how valuable we are, and to let the people know that fight us every day, that we're not going away.
Understood. Sean OBrien, president of the Teamsters, thanks so much, and we'll be looking forward to hearing who your union eventually endorses. Thanks for being here. And we'll be right back. Former President Trump has promised to launch the largest deportation operation in American history, and he has blamed the Biden administration for a historic number of illegal border crossings in recent years. But those crossings have fallen sharply since the Biden administration implemented new asylum restrictions in June. CBS News immigration reporter Camil Montoya has more.
Hoy te deportaron de los Estados Unidos. You were deported from the U.S. today, this morning.
Hoy en la mañana.
In the morning. How are you feeling now? ¿Cómo te sientes ahora?
Pues estoy desesperado porque no sé qué voy a hacer.
You don't know what you're going to do.
Quiero regresar.
We found that desperation is all too familiar in this border town, where scores of migrants are routinely turned away by the U.S.
We're in Nogales, Mexico. As you can see, the U.S. is just a few yards away in that direction. But for many of the migrants here behind me, it is now completely out of reach. They were deported just this morning from the U.S. under President Biden's executive order on asylum.
That order has shut down asylum processing between legal entry points at the U.S.-Mexico border, allowing officials to ramp up deportations of migrants crossing illegally.
And so you see dozens of people, families with children, deported every morning.
Every morning. It's 24/7.
Dora Rodriguez crossed the U.S. border herself in the 1980s to escape the civil war in El Salvador. She comes to Nogales every week with other American volunteers to offer food and guidance to deportees in need.
You know, they don't even know where they're at.
They don't know where they are.
They don't even know where they are.
Or what to do.
Right. So we encourage them to go to the shelters, local shelters in this area, to get a bath, to take a good meal.
The Biden administration says the new measures are partly why illegal border crossings have hit a 4-year low. But according to Rodriguez, those policies mean people fleeing danger are being turned away.
They're fleeing violence from organized crimes, from gangs, hunger. So they're no criminals, you know, and they are yet punished by our laws. These people is traumatized for a lifetime.
You wanted to protect your daughters. Querías proteger a tus hijas.
Rosales and her daughters had been deported that morning. She says her family fled their hometown in Mexico after a man started harassing her daughters.
Quería darle la explicación para mis hijos.
You wanted to explain to U.S. officials why you came, pero no te dieron esa oportunidad. You
No,
did not get that chance.
nada.
Are you planning to potentially enter the U.S. again?
Sí,
Yes,
por mis hijas,
because of your daughters.
por mis hijas. Arriesga uno por su
Pero
familia
te
todo.
pueden deportar otra vez. They can deport you again.
Lo sé,
You know that.
lo sé. Pero hay veces que hay que arriesgar todo.
You're willing to take that risk.
A risk many will still take, despite harsher U.S. policies. Camil Montoya, CBS News, Nogales, Mexico.
We are joined now by Texas Republican Congressman Tony Gonzales. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us here in Washington. You represent a border district. You heard what Camilo just reported, and let's put some numbers up on the screen so people really know what we're talking about. All year long, the number of migrant encounters along the southern border was hovering a little below 200,000 a month. Then this executive order went into place in early June, and those numbers plunged to 100,000 in July. They were cut in half. Are you ready to call this move a success?
Nancy, it's great to be here. You know, I represent nearly half of the overall southern border. I literally was on the border on Friday. What I can tell you is things are getting worse. And let me give you an example. So in the New Mexico area, to date, there's been 100 illegal immigrants that have perished, okay? Every part of the border is different. Parts of my district, it takes you 3 days humping through the desert in order to make it to the border. In the New Mexico area, it takes you 1 hour. So how is 100 people dying in 1 hour? The reason is these criminal organizations are holding these migrants in these stash houses for sometimes over a month, feeding them one meal and one bottle of water a day. So when it is time for them to finally make that trek, they give them caffeine pills and they try to rush them over. So in many cases, the humanitarian crisis along the border is getting worse. The other piece of it, too, in El Paso, one of the safest countries in America, the FBI just conducted an operation this week, and they scooped up dozens of these criminal gangs, via the anti-gang task force. So in many cases, Americans are less safe because of this, and migrants are less safe for this. I've been of the advocate, this is how you solve it. If somebody comes over illegally, they immediately get deported. You also double down on legal immigration. If we want to win the space race, we're going to need engineers from all over the world. If we're going to grow our economy, we're going to need the hospitality industry, construction workers, and other areas. You double down on work visas. You vet people, and you double down on that. We're not seeing any of that.
So you've been pushing for the administration to take executive action for years. They've now done it, and you're saying you're not happy about it, even though the numbers have come down so sharply?
Well, ask the 100 families that died. This is a part of the ugly part of it is so many people are dying, and those are the people that are dying. What about the people that are getting assaulted in other areas? It's getting worse. So people are looking at the numbers and thinking, oh, it's getting better. I look at it, who is coming over and what is happening to these people. In many cases, these criminal organizations, these Tran de Agua, TDA, they're growing in prominence. These Venezuelan gangs, they're all over the country, and they're seeping their tentacles into our society. We have to get ahead of this, and we need real solutions. Right. That real solution is holding these people accountable, deporting people that aren't here, and double down on legal work visas, people doing it the right way.
Right, so there are bipartisan proposals to deal with these very complicated problems you're describing. One of them was struck in the Senate, but former President Trump scuttled that deal, as you know. Do you wish that he would have allowed that to go forward?
There were some positive things out of that, the border package that the Senate was working on, but there were some very negative things. I wouldn't have voted for that. The reason I wouldn't vote for it, because it allowed 5,000 people to break the law before you enact it. The number should always be zero. We can both be firm on illegal immigration, and there was no talk of legal immigration. What about rewarding those that are doing it the right way? What about our allies in Afghanistan that we've left behind? There's some things that could have been done. That was a failed bill. There's thousands of these bills. That was a failed bill before it even gets going. I'm looking for serious partners.
There's a bipartisan bill in the House. Do you support that?
Which bill? I mean, the bill that I look at it through the lens is...
I'm talking about Congresswoman Escobar's bill.
Oh, that has no chance of going anywhere. You know why? Because it's 500 pages long. So that gives you any one person to say, I don't like this bill. The other piece of it, too, is it talks about allowing people that are here illegally pathway to citizenship. That is dead on arrival. You don't even want to go there. You have to start with securing the border and work visas, people that are vetted here to come. You want to talk about pathway to citizenship? That's code for you really do not want to solve the problem.
Okay, but you say you want to solve the problem, and yet you don't like any of the bipartisan proposals out there. Are you writing your own?
I do, yeah. I have a bill. It's actually 3 pages long. And what it does is it extends work visas from 1 year to 3 years, and it allows people to streamline the process. Instead of mailing in work visas, you do it online like everyone else. And there's also a border security piece to it, too. So you can do both. We can both be warm and welcoming, and we can both secure the border. All the proposals right now have no chance of it. And here's another thing. Has Tim Walz ever been to the border? When was the last time he's been to the border? So you have to see it to hear these stories about the 100 migrants that have died in New Mexico. You have to see it firsthand.
You served in the Navy for 20 years. As a veteran, I want to get your take on what happened this week at Arlington National Cemetery. The Secretary of the Army felt that she had to put out a statement saying that an ANC employee, an Arlington National Cemetery employee who attempted to ensure adherence to the rules was abruptly pushed aside when the Trump campaign tried to bring a campaign photographer onto the grounds with the former president. And then a top Trump advisor posted even after that, I'm reposting this to hope to trigger the hacks at the Secretary of Army's office. Have you ever seen a campaign talk this way about the military?
You know, the funny thing about President Trump is he gets all the attention, and no matter what he does, sometimes that gets spun this way or the other. I can tell you that veterans...
That's not spin. That's his own campaign staff.
Well, I can tell you veterans support Trump far and away. And the fact that he was there to highlight that the 13 Americans that were killed at Abbey Gate, I think that's something that's overlooked. Once again, I served in Afghanistan. Unlike Tim Walz, who did not serve in Afghanistan, I've been there. I retired as an E9. Unlike Tim Walz, who retired as an E8, it's important for us to show up at the same
I'm just curious, when you compare your service to Tim Walz, are you saying that he's somehow less of a veteran?
I'm saying he lied about what pay grade he retired at. And I'm saying I'm not lying about the pay grade I retired at. I'm also saying it's important that Arlington is a very special place.
It is.
We have to make sure it's a special place, and we have to keep politics out of it. And I think it's important that we do that. And so, I wish both President Trump and, President Biden were there highlighting the fact of these Gold Star families. This is what we need to get back to. It's so much finger pointing. I get it. It's towards the tail end of the election. But we have to get back to putting veterans first, putting our families first, and putting the American people above everything else.
Congressman Tony Gonzales of Texas, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I appreciate
Nancy.
it. And we'll be back in a moment. Stick with us. Election Day is still more than 2 months away, but voters in dozens of states won't have to wait for November to cast a ballot. 36 states plus the District of Columbia allow voters to cast early ballots by mail without providing an excuse. And in 47 states plus D.C., voters have the option to vote early either by mail or in person. Joining us with a look at our election system is David Becker. He's a former civil rights attorney at the Department of Justice who now leads the Center of Election Innovation and Research. He's also a contributor here at CBS. David, it is so good to see you. It is Labor Day weekend, so it's the traditional kickoff of the election season. Amazing to think that voters in North Carolina are going to start getting their mail-in ballots as soon as this week. Give us a lay of the land. Is it going to be easier or harder for voters to cast their ballots in 2024 than it was in 2020?
Well, there's a lot of political rhetoric out there about overemphasizing fraud or overemphasizing voter suppression, and there have been some bad laws passed in some states. For instance, those voters in North Carolina will now have to provide some additional identification when they vote by mail. But overall, if we look at the history of the United States, it is easier to vote than ever before in American history. And 99.9% of voters, when they go to try to vote, they're going to find it's an easy, convenient experience. If they choose to vote in person, they're going to be around their neighbors and members of their community. They're going to wait in line less than 30 minutes. That's the normal voting experience in the United States. It is easier to register to vote than ever before. More voters have access to online voter registration now, 40%, 40 states or more. More voters are automatically registered at the Motor Vehicles Agency, things like that. And then you can check your registration easier than ever before online, right there on the state's website in almost every state. And same with voting. As you showed, early voting is available in almost every single state. Mail voting without an excuse is available in the vast majority of states. So voters are going to have a choice and be able to vote very conveniently.
What should people know about registering to vote if they haven't gotten around to it yet?
So there's still plenty of time. That's the good news. Every single state allows registration to vote for November up to 30 days before the election. So you'll have until early October to register. If you haven't registered yet, do it today. It's a great time. Go online. Go to vote.gov. That's a great site to find information from your state. What you'll do is there's a drawdown menu there, and you put in your state, and you'll find out information, and it'll take you to the official state source, which is the place you should always go to check your registration or register to vote. Some states allow registration through October and even on Election Day itself. But every single state, every single eligible voter in the United States can register to vote up until early October.
David, you've been really proactive. I see you online, pushing back when you encounter really serious election misinformation, particularly when it comes from someone like Elon Musk, who owns a social media platform and has been pushing some really inflammatory claims when it comes to voting.
Yeah, there are very powerful forces that want us as Americans who live in our democratic society to doubt that democratic society, to doubt our elections that decide our leaders, and to hate our neighbors, to think of our neighbors as enemies if they happen to disagree with us politically. And the fact is that our elections are as secure as they've ever been. We have more paper ballots now than ever before. Those paper ballots are auditable and recountable, and we do audit them to make sure that the machines counted them accurately. We have more accurate voter lists than ever before, thanks to better technology and data that allows states to share data between states and within a state to make sure that we keep up with people as they move so that we have the right address for them. We have more pre-election litigation than ever before. Some people think that's a bad thing. I happen to think it's a good thing. It clarifies those rules. When we get to Election Day, both sides, all the candidates know those rules. Those are the rules we're playing under. You might not like them, but those are the rules, and you can't complain about them once Election Day comes. And then we have had more post-election litigation that has confirmed and verified the results than ever before. We sit here 46 months after the last presidential election right now, an election that has withstood more scrutiny than any election in world history. More scrutiny than any election in world history. And there is still not a single shred of evidence that's been presented to any court. It's been presented on social media. It's easy to put anything up on social media. But to present it to a court, subject it to scrutiny and cross-examination, have a judge hear it and rule, there's not been a single shred of evidence presented in any court in the country.
But are we seeing even more misinformation this election season than we've seen in the past, and where's it coming from?
Yeah, we're seeing more election disinformation for sure. It's coming from Donald Trump. It's coming from Elon Musk. It's coming from, we know, foreign adversaries like Russia and Iran and North Korea and China, who are heavily invested in not only perhaps electing a particular candidate, but in also all of them are heavily invested in getting us to doubt that the accurate candidate was elected, to doubt that our democracy and our elections are working. And so when you see information on social media in particular that triggers something within you, that seems to make you angry about the other side, all of us as sophisticated media consumers should pause and say, maybe that anger is the product they're trying to create. Maybe they're getting paid or they're benefiting from creating that anger in us. And instead go to the trusted sources, our election officials, Republicans, Democrats, all across the country. There are hundreds of thousands of them. Our election is going to be run by them, these professionals, and we're going to rely upon about 1 million volunteers, people in our communities and our neighborhoods who are going to volunteer their time for a long day on Election Day to make sure that our elections are accurate. And if anyone has any doubts about the system, volunteer to join them. Volunteer to be a poll worker. Go onto your local county or local election site. It's usually very easy to volunteer. They're looking for people, and you'll see firsthand all of the checks and balances and redundancies that prevent widespread fraud.
Great advice. David Becker, election law expert for CBS News. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Nancy.
it. And we'll be right back. The next presidential debate will be on Tuesday, September 10th, and we will have complete coverage with a preview special at 8 p.m. Eastern here on CBS. The live simulcast will be at 9 p.m., followed by expert analysis. That's it for us today. Thanks for watching. For Face the Nation, I'm Nancy Cordes. Have a great holiday.